The Budget Office of the Federation has defended Executive Order 9, rejecting claims that it amounts to the president making law. In a statement, Director General Tanimu Yakubu said that the order does not create law, but enforces constitutional custody of federal revenue. He cited Section 80 of the Constitution, which requires all revenue raised by the Federation to be paid into the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Now, the order directs direct remittance of petroleum revenue, including royalties, taxes, and penalties, into constitutionally recognized accounts. Yakubu stated that the directive aims to strengthen fiscal integrity for FAAC distributions and budget credibility. He maintained that if any party disputes the constitutional validity of the order, the judiciary remains the proper forum for determination of that. Well, the founder of Agora Policy, Waziri Adio, joins us now to discuss President Bola Tinubu's Executive Order 9 on a review of direct oil and gas revenue remittances to the Federation account and exactly how it will impact the economy. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to Newsday.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So Executive Order 9 appears to set aside specific conditions of the Petroleum Industry Act, particular sections regarding the Frontier Exploration Fund. How does the executive branch, how can they reconcile the use of an order to bypass a validly enacted act of the National Assembly?
Okay, thank you very much. One thing that we need to establish clearly is that the Petroleum Industry Act is a landmark, piece of legislation and a very positive legislation that took the country about 21 years to pass. And it's a beautiful piece of legislation. It's very comprehensive. It brings all the laws in that sector, together in one place. So you can call it like an omnibus law. And it also imposes clarity and, also comes up with terms that will encourage investment and all of that. Having said that, there's no law that is perfect, especially for a law that took 21 years to make, a law that had 319 sections and had 8 schedules. And when you look at the gazetted version, it's actually 252 pages. So definitely there will be some gaps. And the gaps that are contained in the law, they are not flimsy at all. There are gaps that have implication for the Constitution and also implication for revenue to the Federation. So if we take it one after the other, Section 44 and Section 162 of the Constitution affirm the right of the Federation over all natural resources, and that all revenues from natural resources should be paid to the Federation account. So any law that you have that contravenes that says that some part of that revenue, can be retained somewhere else, is problematic and something that needs to be addressed. So that is one. The second thing is that there are some provisions of the Act that overfavor the the National Oil Company at the expense of the Federation. And it's a surprise that the beneficiaries of the Federation account, that's the federal government, the state government, and the local government areas, have not taken action, in terms of approaching the Supreme Court to reverse this. So this is an action that is long overdue. And in October 2024, Agora Policy actually did a paper calling for urgent amendment of the Petroleum Industry Act in order to boost revenue for the Federation. So if you look at, there are two parts, many parts, but there are two parts that I want to highlight. The first is that there's a part that give 30% of PSC profit oil to NNPC as management fee, right? Just for the sake of illustration, production sharing contract, which they call PSC, is a form of arrangement in which the oil block, the oil asset belong to the Federation, but you invite contractors to come and help you with them. So the contractors bring their expertise, they bring their capital, and they're able to withdraw, to deduct all of that. But whatever is left as a profit, right, goes to you after they've paid taxes, after they paid royalty and all of that. So that's your portion of the profit, right, is only 40% that goes to the federation. 30% of that is given to NNPC Limited as management fee. And by the way, it's not that NNPC is managing the PSCs. NNPC is overseeing the management of the PSC. So if you have somebody, you have a house and somebody is like your supervisor who helps you to look at, to manage it, and that person is getting 30% of the profit, that is outrageous. That has no precedent. That is something that cannot be sustained. In addition to that, another 30% is put aside for frontier exploration. It's kept with the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, but it's used by NNPC. So effectively, you are keeping 60% of PSC profit oil out of the purview of the federation account. That is egregious. That is something that contravenes the Constitution. That is, even if the NNPC is entitled to any commission at all, of course, it can be 30%. And whatever commission is likely to get, the money should have been paid to the federation account first. As you know, NRS, former FRS, and customs, and others, they collect what they call cost of collection. But whatever money they've collected on behalf of the federation, that money is paid into the federation account first. And then the federation will ask, okay, so what is the agreed percentage, which is 4% or 7% in the case of NRS and Nigeria Customs respectively. And that is paid to them. But you don't hijack the money up front. That is illegal. Then when you go to,
Okay, now you have spoken very well, and I certainly hear you. But I'm wondering, should such a significant change in revenue administration come through an executive order, or should it be subjected to legislative debate at the National Assembly?
Okay, there are different options available to a president in terms of changing or, bringing about a piece of law. One of them is, you seek an amendment, which I think is the proper thing to do. But executive orders are also some kind of interim measures that you can take. So I've heard about the debates about whether it should have done it with an executive order or it should have sought an amendment. I have no doubt that it's going to seek an amendment. I think the executive order is an interim measure. By the way, if he had gone to the National Assembly at the first instance, I have no doubt that this will be filibustered and will be timed out. The amount of money at play, the 30% of profit oil that went to NNPC, that goes to NNPC as management fee, amounted to 453 billion naira in 2025 alone, right? With that amount of money at play, that is the other thing is NNPC, which is something that people do not talk about enough, and I think even the president is not talking about this, is that NNPC is already, there's adequate provision for NNPC in the first instance, that, you're allowed to cover all your costs, right? The federation assets were divested to NNPC to manage. This is before the federation used to get substantial amount of money, the highest revenue stream actually from NNPC, from sale of its crude oil and gas. Now you say, okay, use everything as your working material, as your working capital, make profit for us. When you make profit, pay 80% and deduct 20% and retain 20% for your operations. For you to get to profit, that means you have covered all your costs, because profit is revenue minus cost. And you are still allowed to keep 20%. But you know the story. The story is not that they're allowed to keep 20%, which is generous enough. In 2025, NNPC committed to pay 271 billion naira every month as dividend, which is what the federation was exchanging, for the sale of crude oil and gas, right? For 12 months, each month, NNPC did not pay anything. So for 12 months, that would have amounted to 3.25 trillion naira. NNPC paid nothing out of that 3.25 trillion naira, right? So the amount of money that is at play is enough to kind of frustrate whatever the president wants to do. So on this one, the president has our full support. And yes, he should go ahead and still seek an amendment, because an executive order is an interim thing. He cannot, you cannot have that for a long time. But now that the president has showed his hands and he has sent the signal that this is something, it's not maybe somebody from somewhere or somebody from somewhere that's interested in this, and it's something that is not doing for the federal government, it's something that is doing for the federation. There's no way that the agent can benefit more from an asset than the principal. So this is something that the other issue around, should it have been by executive order, should it have been by amendment?
Right.
You can see it as a set of steps. The
Right.
first one is that there's an executive order that has immediate effect. Then you now have the legislation, which we think, the amendment, which we think should even go beyond the things that have been listed for now.
Well, just to interrupt you, just for the sake of time, Yes, I hear you, but just for the sake of time, before we let you go, we know that the order could boost the Federation account allocations to up to 15 trillion naira annually. I'm wondering how this sudden influx of liquidity, how it's going to affect inflation and the exchange rate if state governments increase their spending simultaneously.
Well, I think we should be careful about overstating some of these things. I've read stories about 16 trillion and all of that. I think it shows that the people do not have enough knowledge of the amount that is involved. It's far, far, far from that. We should focus on the principle of it. Should the money belonging to the federation go to the federation? Yes. We can quibble around issue about should it be through executive order, should it be through amendment. But it's, from the total amount from petroleum, profit oil from PSC in 2025 was 1.5 trillion. Right, so where they got 16 trillion, I don't know. The money from from gas flaring was on the average like 35 billion every month. So a ballpark, you're talking about like 1.5 trillion in all. That will be extra money, because out of that 1.5, 604 of the PSC profit oil, 604 billion went to the federation in 2025. Is 907 that was sequestered as both Frontier Exploration Fund and 30% for NNPC as management fee. So I don't think the amount of money we're talking about should be more than max like 2 trillion if they are focusing on what they are focusing on now. But if they look at revisiting this dividend policy, should we have a dividend policy, or should we go back to the federation, benefiting directly from the sale of its crude oil after paying for cash call and all of that? There might be, a more bump, in terms of a greater bump in terms of the money that will come. So I don't think the fear should be about how this will increase money supply and all of that. The thing is about, is it a right thing to do? Yes, it's the right thing to do. Is it the amount that is being touted in some portions of the press is less than that? Is there a reason why it should not be done? No, it should be done. Then we can talk about, if you are adding in 2025, the gross revenue for the federation account was 37 trillion, right? So if you are adding 2 trillion to it, I don't think that is what will significantly move the needle in terms of inflation, and all of that, and let the owner of the money working with the monetary authorities decide on how to manage that. Not to say because of that. By the way, when you're talking about inflation, that money is already somewhere else. So it's not money that is not in circulation. So whether the money is with NNPC or with FEF or with Federation is immaterial. It's the same money that is in supply.
Well, Founder Agora Policy, Waziri Adio, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.